Well, hello guys, this is Brandon with Little NC Farmer. We're out here on a cool October Wednesday morning, uh, October the 20th if I'm not mistaken. And I looked at my thermometer before I came out here. It was 41 degrees, but you can check it to see the actual lowest temperature that has failed to today, and it's been down to 39. So for the first time this season, I think to best of my knowledge we have dropped into the 30s. So I don't think it was down this cold yesterday morning. 43 is the lowest that I noticed that it got. Now, I didn't check it, but that's the lowest because I was up and about, and so that's the lowest that I noticed it dropped to. And of course I don't know what they're telling on the TV or anything like that, but anyway, I know that's what it is here. And this little jacket that I have on is actually almost not thick enough to be out here. I need my heavy coat, to be honest with you, but we'll get by. And so anyway, I do want to say, before I get into our topic and get into talking, before I forget it, I can't express this enough. I want to thank each one of my subscribers. Y'all mean so much to me. I enjoy reading your comments and different things like that. And I appreciate your patience, just like last week when I was unable to be able to put anything out, or a week before last, I believe it was. I appreciate y'all standing by and, sticking with me. I appreciate that so very much. And but anyway, just wanted to tell y'all how much I appreciate each one of you. And some of you send me emails and different things like that, and so I appreciate that so much. And on my channel page, in case some of you are wanting to know, if you will actually go to my channel and you can scroll down in that bar at the top, I think it says home, and then it says videos and maybe playlist, I'm not sure, but there's one over there that says about. And if you will click on that one, that will give you my email address in case you ever wanted to correspond by email. I know people have prayer requests, things like that they don't want to share publicly, and I understand that. And so you're able to share something with me via my email. And if I can ever get in the habit of it, I will try to put that under my videos in the description. A lot of times I just put a little subtitle down there to kind of explain what the video's about and just kind of let it go at that. But I really need to get in the habit of putting my email address in there, and also my mailing address. It's a P.O. box, and I do need to put that in there as well. Now, it's on my about page in case you're wanting to know. So just thought I would share that little bit of information with you. And y'all saw the video that came out yesterday where I worked up the garden out here. And guys, I am just so pleased with my garden this year. I mean, overall it has done great. And right now I can go cut another mess of okra. I mean, it's just hanging full. The stems are just leaning over, and that's something I've got to try and do today. And I want to try to make a video on cooking it in the air fryer. I haven't got around to doing that yet, because most of it, if I don't cook it, I can it, and if I don't can it, I end up giving it away to someone else. And so we've had a lot of people around wanting okra, and I don't mind. I've canned a lot of it this year, canned it for frying more than I ever have, and I like it that way. And so it saves room in my freezer, and my freezer is full, and my son's already talking about deer season. And so we've got to make some preparations for that. I do know, of course, I've got some okra in there that I froze, but I use that specifically for making seafood gumbo when I make that, and I'll be making me a batch of that later on, hopefully, now that the weather's cooling off, because I like that. You know, it's kind of like a soup, and I kind of like that in cooler weather. And so hopefully we'll be doing that in the days to come. But I've got a lot of stuff in there, and so I don't know, we're gonna have to do some musical chairs with it or something. I don't know what we'll do there. But I've been looking at some of the videos on bone sauce, and that is something that I would love to try and make if I can get the equipment and stuff that I need to do that with. I feel like it's something that I could do, and so that's another project up the road. I don't know, we'll just have to see how that goes. But anyway, getting back on the garden though, we've had plenty of rain. We're not lacking moisture or anything like that. And matter of fact, if you saw in that video, the lower side of that garden was actually just a little too heavy, but I tore it up anyway because I don't want grass going in there taking it, and that'll probably be the last time I'll get to run through it with a tiller, you know, this year. So if anything, I would like to, once I get the okra out and stuff, kind of break that up a little bit if I can catch it right before rain. You know, it makes it a little easier come spring to break up again. So we'll just have to play it by ear and see what happens and go from there. But overall, guys, I'm well pleased with the results that I got from my garden. I just thank the good Lord above, because I know He's touched it and He's blessed it. And, you know, that's encouraging when you can see God's handiwork and reward you for the fruits of your labor. You know, that's a blessing. And so anyway, but we want to get on into our topic. This is going to be kind of a part 2 of what I talked about last week, how our grandparents made it. And they went through some tough times within our country. And, you know, I kind of introduced you to them on an individual basis, kind of, and put pictures and stuff like that in there. And that was a challenge, guys, to get that uploaded. I made a mistake when I saved that video. I did not have those photographs stored on my computer. They were still on a flash drive. Well, when I got ready to save it, I pulled the flash drive out like I normally do. I had no idea that it was copying those photographs from that flash drive. And when I done that, and when it was through saving the video, it come up with a thing that said those that couldn't find those files. And so anyway, I had to do it all over again, and I had to actually do it twice before I realized what the problem was. So that's why that video was late coming out, and I apologize for that last week. But we got it accomplished, and so anyway, that, you know, that's taken care of. But hopefully we won't have that issue this time. But you know, that was the problem there. But I did want to get those videos up because a photograph can speak volumes. Especially my grandfather there beside that old International truck that he drove. That was his pride and joy. And then seeing him there inside a Thomas bus, bending that steel, he always talked a lot about those days, you know, working. And it would be interesting if some folks that worked there saw those photographs and maybe recognized him. You know, but that would have been back in the 50s and 60s, so I don't know if anybody's alive today that would even remember him or not. You know, that they could be, but chances are maybe not. But anyhow, we want to get back to talking. I want to kind of get into the meat of the matter that we were talking about last week. Just how did they make it? What qualities did they have that helped them to make it through some tough days. Guys, this weather is bothering me just a little bit, so I hope I don't have to go indoors. Maybe not, but we'll try it. Getting that bug in my throat again, or some people call it a frog. So anyway, I'm having to deal with that. But anyway, get to our subject now. What qualities did they have that helped them to get through that? I began to think about one in particular, and out of the 4 of them, I know 3 of them had this quality, and it was stubbornness. Now, stubbornness can be a bad thing or it can be a good thing. You know, it kind of has that's kind of a double-edged sword, you might say. And I mean, I think about both of my grandfathers. They were stubborn, as old saying is, stubborn as a Missouri mule. And if you're watching from Missouri, that's by no means a criticism towards you, so don't think it that way. They used to say, the old term said they had their heels dug in like a Missouri mule, and that meant they weren't going to budge. And so I've heard that saying a lot. But no, they were stubborn. They refused to give up. They refused to quit. Quit was not a part of their vocabulary. And I think that's something that we, and when I say we, I'm definitely talking about myself. It's so easy just to give up and say, what's the use? And it ain't worth it, you know. But that wasn't in their vocabulary. They kept going. Even when they didn't have strength to keep going, they kept going. Now, I've heard my grandmother talk about when she was young, and they grew tobacco. And that was, you know, in this state, that at one time was our big cash crop. And I've heard her talk about, you know, priming tobacco, and then said be out late in the night, and they would be hanging it inside the smokehouse. And, you know, I think she said she would actually tote it in there, but her brothers would be up on the rungs. They would be up hanging it up. But she said when they were curing the tobacco, that I want to share this story with you. I mean, this shows the frugalness of people, and I don't know that I've ever shared this or not. But she said she remembers her mother when, you know, they would be curing the tobacco, and they would have the furnace going outside. It just burnt wood. And basically all it was just a little concrete block structure, and they had a fire in it, and the flue came out and the smoke went, the heat and the smoke actually went inside or into the floor of the smokehouse, or the tobacco barn it was called, and the smoke actually rose up, or the heat rose up through the floor, and that's what actually cured the tobacco. It has to go through that process. And she said while her mother would be there tending that fire, you know, to make sure it didn't get out of hand or make sure it didn't go out or anything like that, said that she would have a bushel basket down there of tomatoes, and she would sit and peel those tomatoes and pack them into jars and seal them up and set those jars up on top of that furnace, and they would actually boil. I mean, they would actually cook right there. And she would set them up on the furnace or the flue or some way or another. I don't know how it was made. If I saw it, I could probably explain it better. But said she's seen her can of many of tomatoes like that. And guys, that was my great-grandmother. That's called being frugal. That's called making your steps count. I did something different time on that one time too. That's called using your time wisely. And she didn't just sit down there and do nothing. She made use of that time. And, you know, I see people today, they may go into a dentist office, or I remember seeing some, you know, they'll sit and sew or something like that. You don't see it now quite as common as you used to, because now they have these phones and they're sitting there looking at that. But back in the day, they would take and maybe if they were shelling peas or if they were stringing beans or something like that, they would bring that with them. Now, not in a dentist office or a doctor's office, of course, but in other, where they would actually be sitting and waiting. I've seen that many a times when I was a boy. I remember seeing people do that. They would bring their stuff while they were waiting and sit there and break their beans up or whatever, and that way they weren't wasting that time. But I guess people's got so uppity today that they can't do that. But that brings me to another real important fact. And, they came up in kind of a transition period. Now, my generation, I think, is considered, I don't know, maybe every generation can be considered that. And when I speak of a generation, I'm just basically taking a decade. I would say my decade would be the 80s. That would be when I actually come to adulthood, you might say, in the latter part of the 80s. But, and then people behind me would have the 70s, and so on. But the transition my generation had was computers. The computers that I was taught on in school are nothing. I mean, nowhere near nothing to what we have today. We couldn't even imagine back then the technology that's out here today. And really everything I learned on computers back then is teetotally obsolete to what we have today. I mean, we actually had to take MS-DOS and do a cold boot on a computer that was shut completely down. We had to put that. And a floppy disk back then, it's not the little square thing like this. It was actually a thing about like this, almost the size of a CD, but it was inside of a little envelope type thing, like a plastic envelope, and you slid it in there and you done MS-DOS, you done a cold boot. And I've even forgot how to do all that, but I remember we had to do that. And then we learned how to do a warm boot. And, that's totally obsolete now to what we have today. But I mean, that's a transition. We kind of got on the short end of the stick on the technology part of that. But anyway, my grandparents, getting back on that, they were coming along, when they were real small, people were still living on farms. They were still dependent upon whatever money their parents may have made by raising livestock or plants, like tobacco or corn or, whatever they were growing. And, that was the life around here. But as we got into the 40s, I would say the 40s, things really began to change. Now, my grandfather on my dad's side, the one that drove the truck, he got experienced the city life a little earlier in his life, and he found out what it was to work in a factory. He found out what gasoline was, and he found out what a car was, and so it changed him, changed his outlook. Now, he still liked to farm, he still had that in his blood, but it became easier to make a living by working in a factory where you had a steady income every week versus raising a big crop and hoping that you made ends meet at harvest time. And see, as the factories began to grow around here, and primarily it was I would say during the 40s. We had several in the area that remained in operation during the Great Depression, but they only got down to like 2 to 3 days a week. And they never laid off any employees, to the best of my knowledge, because that was what was said. I heard several different people make reference to that. They never laid any employees off, but you might won't work but 2 or 3 days a week. That was during the early 30s, around the time of the Great Depression. But as things began to pick back up and our economy began to steam ahead again. I mean, guys, in the 40s, if you was a fixer working on full fashion knitting machines, you were the one that drove a new car. I mean, I'm just saying, it's not that way now, but I mean, and if you had a job at one of these places, I mean, I could name them, I'm not going to, but these hosiery mills that were here in our town, if you had a job at there's 3 major ones, if you had a job at one of those, you were set. And like I say, it's not that way now. But the factories became appealing to the people that lived off out in the country, you know. And, you know, I mentioned last week my grandfather took riders to work. And a lot of people, that's how they became introduced to that type of life. And a lot of people down in the country, they found them a way back and forth to work. And they started making a living for themselves. My grandmother's, I guess it would have been her oldest sister. Can't remember for sure. Anyway, one of the oldest. She started working in a hosiery mill. I think she was sewing, if I remember right. And she got a job there and worked in it pretty much all of her adult life, you know, till she retired. And she did that a long time and made a good living for herself. But the reason a lot of people during that time period did that was because they had a more sustainable income, a more dependable income that was steady, and it was there every week or every 2 weeks, however, you know, their schedule was set up. Where, like I just said earlier, living on the farm, they didn't have that. And you basically, you took a gamble. And it's no different today. I mean, it's sad to see what's going on. I mean, the small farm, the small family farms, they're not profitable now like they used to be because the overhead that they had to have to keep it in operation is so high till it eats up all of your profit. And I was thinking this morning, or last night, as I was going to work, no, I take that back. It was yesterday afternoon. I went to take the trash off, and I took the long way around coming home. Sometimes I like to do that. And I passed by a little store building on the way, and you could see the house set back off the road just a little ways from the store. The store was actually right out close to the highway, and it had a covered porch, and it covered where the pumps would sit, and it covered both aisles. You know, they were 2 aisles. And I began to think about that. You know, I remember our land, you know, our neighborhood, our county, you know, in this general area, those stores was dotted all over, everywhere. And I remember some of them, you know, being vacant, but I do remember a lot of them that were still in operation. Now, I was a small child then, but I can remember some being in operation. But as your big box stores began to come into the towns around here, you slowly started seeing those little mom and pop stores falling by the wayside. But something else that affected them was when the people that lived in the country started working in the big city, and they were right there where a lot of these big box stores were. They would do their shopping before they came home and get their stuff a little cheaper, and the little mom and pop store missed out. And that's sad because that's their livelihood. There's one, I read a story that was in our local newspaper, if I remember right, and I won't call the store's name, but it's back over the country here. The building and all is still there. And they said the gentleman would, he would always carry their groceries out for them when someone come in to buy a few things. And they said this lady had been to our big town out here and had bought groceries and realized she had forgot to get a loaf of bread. So she thought, well, I'll stop in here. And so she stopped in there. She got a loaf of bread, and I forget, got a few other little items, you know, to go along with it. And he said, ma'am, I'll help you tote that out. Well, he comes out there and opens the back seat, the back door, and he sees all of those groceries in there. He wasn't a bit happy about that. It would break my heart too. I mean, to know that my faithful customers are all of a sudden not faithful no more. Why I got off on this, I was talking about our grandparents, but maybe we'll get back into it more next week. But we got to look back at the times that they grew up in, guys, and that helps you to understand some of what they went through. And I've heard a lot of this, I've heard just like the story about my grandmother canning the tomatoes. I mean, that's a story that I've heard her actually tell. And, you know, there's other things as well. But it put a stubbornness in them that they wouldn't quit. Now, how do we apply that to us? Well, look around us today. We've got all kinds of obstacles without naming any. I mean, there's one big one that's right in front of all of us. And, you know, are we going to overcome it, or will it overcome us? And I think the card's out on that yet. I really don't know the answer. I'm not even going to touch that with a 10-foot pole right now. There's things I know that I can't talk about here. And, you know, but regardless of what happens there, I'm going to be a winner either way. If it overcomes me, I'm still a winner, because I know I've made my calling and election sure. I've trusted Jesus Christ as my Savior, and I know where I'll leave. I know where I'll go when I leave this world. So that preparation is made, and my name's written in the Lamb's Book of Life, and so I'm not worried about that part. But, you know, if you're stuck here and you have to deal with all the aftermath, do we have enough gumption, there's that word that I've used before, and grit to bear down and do what's needed to keep going? Now, I mean, let's look at this on a serious note for just a minute. There's a lot of people, they've lost family members due to all this. And we'll need the Lord's help, because you've got missing people. And that's going to leave a void, that's going to leave a sadness, an emptiness within our heart. I mean, I think about my grandmother. She amazed me so much, and my grandfather on my dad's side. But my grandmother, you know, I've told y'all, she's still living. She will be, next February, if she lives, she'll be 90 years old. And, you know, and I think about how she kept going after my grandfather passed away. And I really watched that, and I admired her for how she just kept going. And she stayed busy. I mean, she didn't stop. And this is something that's precious to me. I've got some photographs somewhere, I don't know where they're at, but I think that following summer, she came here and helped me make kraut once. And she's actually done it more than one time, but I actually took some photographs of that time. And she's helped other of us grandchildren make kraut, make chow chow. Those are special times. And you know, this is the blessed part about it though. I look forward to doing the same thing, to be able to help my children, my grandchildren, if I'm blessed with some, to be able to do that, to pass it along and pass that knowledge down. See, that's something that's lacking now, guys. There's very little of it being passed down. But And my grandfather on my dad's side, when my grandmother passed away, and it was tough. I could tell, you know, that he missed her. They, like I say, they like just a few months being married 60 years. And I could tell, but he kept going. He would go fishing, and he enjoyed my company because all the other grandchildren on that side was considerable older than I was, and they did not live around there, but I was the one that was there primarily with him day in and day out. And after I graduated high school and I began to work public work, I wasn't there as much. He started to really go downhill quick. And you know, but I had to do what I had to do. I mean, you know, you got to go to work. And I know he understood that, but I could tell that not having someone there with him, I think he really started to go downhill. And that following fall, he passed away. And, you know, but it is what it is. But anyway, guys, hopefully I might talk some more about this. There's so much really that could be told, and hopefully next week I may dig into some more on it. But we just talked a little bit about stubbornness today, but what made them stubborn and what they actually went through during that time. Now I'm just talking just about folks around here. This is what I do know. And it may be similar in your area where you grew up. And if you're not inside the United States, I don't know, you know, in other countries and other locations, I don't know how it would be. But anyway, that's the way it is here. But guys, I appreciate your attention today. I appreciate you hanging with us and watching. And just hang in there. I hope we're going to have a lot more interesting things in the days ahead. So guys, y'all take care, and till next week, we'll talk to you again. Thank you from Little NC Farmer.